So page 178 of God to Man, Man to God, the Discourses of Mir Baba by Charles Purdom. 3, the memories of past lives. Those who have immediate access to the supersensible truths concerning the life of self and its reincarnation know through perception that birth is an incarnation of the individualized soul. The continuity of the life of the reincarnating soul is punctuated by the incidents of birth and death, which are both comparable to the gateways of the stream of life advancing from one type of existence to another. Both are equally necessary to the life of the soul, and the interval between death and birth is as necessary as the interval between birth and death. Those who consider death to be the termination of individual existence, in common with those who consider the birth of the body to be its beginning, are confronted with a conflict between their false assumptions and the claims of intuition. From the point of view of justice, the lot of the good and the bad in respect of material happiness or prosperity seems to deny the rationality of the entire scheme of the universe. For the virtuous in the throes of suffering and the vicious in possession of pleasure create difficulties for many minds. Unless there is some explanation, the mind is riddled with perplexities that may embitter the outlook and foster cynicism, which may be worse than the deepest personal sorrow that death may cause. But in spite of appearances to the contrary, the human mind has an inborn tendency to restore to itself a deep faith in the intrinsic sanity and value of life. Those who have direct access to the truth of reincarnation are fewer than those who have direct access to the truth of immortality. The memories of all past lives are preserved in the mind body of the individual soul, but they are not accessible to consciousness because a veil is drawn over them. When the soul changes its physical body, it gets a new brain, and its normal waking consciousness functions in close association with the brain processes. Under ordinary circumstances, only the memories of the present life appear in consciousness because the brain acts as a hindrance to the release of the memories of those experiences gathered through the medium of other brains in past lives. In rare instances, memories of past lives enter the present life in the form of dreams. A man may see in his dreams persons whom he has never met in his present life. It may happen that they were those he had encountered in past lives. But of course, such dreams cannot be regarded as memory of past lives. They merely indicate that the imagination was influenced by past lives. The real memory of past lives is clear, steady, and sure. And when it comes, a man or woman has no longer any doubt about their having existed before. Marian, can you continue, please?
Yes. Release of the memory of past lives. The number of persons who remember their past lives is small compared with those who are so bound to the gross sphere of existence as not even to suspect supersensible realities. The release of these memories is conditioned by the limitations of the brain, as long as consciousness is subject to the physical body and its brain processes. But when consciousness is emancipated from the limitations imposed by the brain, it recovers and reestablishes the memories of past lives stored in the mental body. This requires a degree of detachment and understanding that only spiritually advanced persons have. The memory of past lives is enjoyed by those who are crossing the inner planes, but have not yet become spiritually perfect. Loss of this memory does not affect spiritual progress and is not necessary for guidance in the course of spiritual evolution. Spiritual evolution consists in living in the light of the highest values, perceived through intuition, and not allowing it to be obscured by the past. Even the memory of the present life may act as an obstacle. Emancipation may be said to be a problem of securing freedom from the past, which for those who are bound to the wheel of birth and death, inexorably shapes the present life. Conditions of safety in the release of memory. Life would be much more complicated were those not spiritually advanced burdened by the conscious memory of past lives. They would get unsettled by the diversity of settings in which they and others would appear in the light of such a memory. But they are not called upon to face such confusion because they are now shielded from the resurrection of the past. Things and persons exist in a limited and definite context, with the result that they find it possible to determine actions and to feel responses in the light of what is known from the present life. This does not mean that actions and responses are entirely determined by such knowledge. For all that has happened in past lives has an unconscious share in determining present actions and responses. But in spite of the influence of past lives, the fact remains that shielded from the resurrection of memory, consciousness is not subjected to that confusion, which would result if conscious memory of past lives existed. The memory of past lives is without confusion only when a person has become desireless and has lost the feeling of mine and thine. Those whom he once looked upon as belonging to him might, in the present life, seem to belong to someone else. And if he were to carry on old attachments and claims into the present life, there would be great complications, misery, and confusion for himself as well as for others. Possessiveness has to be purged from the mind if the aspirant is to be spiritually prepared for withstanding the disturbing influence of memory from past lives. A spiritually prepared man becomes desireless and has impersonal love. The entanglements of the personal ego have disappeared from his mind. He looks upon old friends and enemies with the same equanimity. And he is free from the idea of claims against others or of others against himself, because he has realized the truth of the unity of life. Only when a person is thus spiritually prepared is he unaffected by revived memory, and only then is it worthwhile for him to have access to it. For only then has he that cool judgment and pure, incorruptible love, which enable him to make right use of the new knowledge. This knowledge opens to him information about his own incarnations and about the incarnations of others connected with him, and not only enables him to advance further on the path by conscious karmic adjustments, but also to help others by directing them in the light of what he knows of their past lives. The speed of spiritual evolution quickens after the recover of memory of past incarnations. Disentanglement from earthly things is facilitated by conscious knowledge of the history of the development of such entanglements. Evolution, which so far was mostly unconscious, now becomes conscious. The obstacles as well as the facilities created by the past are now in the reach of consciousness, and therefore are capable of intelligent handling. Inarticulate intuition is supplemented by rationalized thought. Therefore, action has less possibility of error. The masters of wisdom have no special interest in past incarnations, for they are among the many unimportant facts of earthly existence. If they make use of their knowledge of the past lives of a person, it is only for helping him onwards towards the eternal truth. The details of the path may be determined by 1, the incidents of the past, 2, the manner in which the aspirant has sought the highest truth in his past lives, and 3, the obstacles or the facilities that he has created for himself through his past doings. All these things hidden from the aspirant are open to the perception of the master, who uses his knowledge to accelerate the spiritual progress of the seeker of the truth. For specific conditions of an incarnation, the self has its source in the infinite, formless, sexless, and indivisible being of God, who is beyond all forms of duality or evolution. With the beginning of the individualized soul, there is the beginning of duality and evolution. Though the specific form of duality, consisting in the distinction and attraction based upon sex, makes its appearance at a later stage. Duality exists as soon as there is subject and object, a center of consciousness, howsoever dim, and its environment. Sex is a specific kind of bodily attraction, which presupposes differentiation of forms. A specific kind of psychic entanglement with the forms, and a specific expression of life and energy. Sex has duality. In the mineral kingdom, there is no sex. In the kingdom of plants and trees, the bodily differentiations of sex with specialized biological functions have come into existence. But plants and trees do not generate sex consciousness. Since the development of consciousness in plants and trees is rudimentary, and its expressions are not influenced by bodily differentiations. The possible contact between the male and the female in plants and trees is due to their being fixed in the ground and are indirect only through the intermediate agency of the wind and insects. Therefore, though sex differentiation may be said to have begun to emerge with the evolution of forms, even at the level of plants and trees, they cannot be said to have sex consciousness. The evolution of sex is the evolution of the consciousness of duality. In this evolution, plants and trees are midway between minerals, who have no sex, and birds and animals who have it in its complete form. Just before the self incarnates itself in a human form, it arrives in the animal forms as consciousness and energy. It then takes a human body. Reincarnation of the individualized soul through human forms is preceded by its transmigration through the subhuman forms. Thus, the soul has experience of all existence. Sex in animals not only expresses itself through bodily differences and activities, but is a deep-rooted factor that affects consciousness. Since human beings inherit their bodies, as well as their consciousness, from highly evolved animals, human beings also find themselves subject to sex duality. In human beings, however, sex is so completely developed that it is no longer a matter merely of the body, for it substantially modifies the psyche, which seeks expression through the body according to whether the form is male or female. After attaining the human form, there is, except in rare instances, no reversion to animal forms. The normal course for the soul is to go through countless reincarnations in the human form, sometimes male and sometimes female, according to the sanskaras and the spiritual requirements of the soul. The female form has the prerogative that even sadgurus and the avatars have to be born through the female form. But the male form has the prerogative that the majority of sadgurus appear in a male form. Women can indeed become saints and sadgurus, but the avatar always appears as a male. The facilities and handicaps of an incarnation are determined by the sanskaras, which the individual soul has accumulated in the past. The needs of the further development of the soul are relative to the nature of its accumulated sanskaras, which determine whether the soul takes its incarnation in the East or the West, and whether in the male or female form, or whether in one cycle of existence or another.
Thanks, Marian. Elizabeth, are you ready to read? I guess she's not at her machine. Ernie, please.
I can read in 5 minutes.
Okie dokie.
East and West. In general, the East has developed more on spiritual than material lines. With the result that the Eastern mind has a spontaneous aspiration for God, and the West, on the whole, has developed more on material than spiritual lines, with the result that the Western mind has a spontaneous urge towards intellectual and artistic things. An incarnation in the East usually brings a greater tendency towards spiritual life than an incarnation in the West. And an incarnation in the West usually brings a greater tendency towards material life than an incarnation in the East. But the soul has to experience the material as well as the spiritual aspects of life before it is freed from the fetters of divided life. Therefore, the same soul has to incarnate in both East and West. Change of sphere. If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the East and then takes an incarnation in the West, it carries with it the impressions of its lives in the East. And though living in the West, it leads a life that is essentially in conformity with the Eastern pattern. If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the West and then takes an incarnation in the East, it carries with it the impressions of its lives in the West. And though living in the East, leads a life that is in conformity with the Western pattern. So sometimes we have the European soul in an Indian form, or an Indian soul in the European form. But it must be borne in mind that this distinction is relative only to past incarnations and sanskaras, and that the soul as such is beyond such distinctions. Cycles of existence. The facilities afforded by male and female incarnations, respectively, are not invariable. They change according to the cycles of existence, as well as according to whether the incarnation is in the East or West. In some ages, men are more active, energetic, and materially minded than women. In other ages, the reverse. In the past, the women of the East were brave and intellectual. They considered no sacrifice too great for the happiness and well-being of the husband. And their spiritual humility went to the extent of looking upon the husband as God. But now in the Eastern Hemisphere, the average man has greater spiritual inclination than the average woman. Just as in the West, the average woman of today has greater spiritual inclination than the average man. A man living in the East is different from a man living in the West. And a woman living in the East is different from a woman living in the West. In comparison with members of the opposite sex, the same soul shows varying degrees of superiority, inferiority, or equality in spiritual or material matters, according to the cycle of existence, the sex of its body, and the earthly sphere in which it takes an incarnation. the need for male and female incarnations. 5, the need for male and female incarnations. Though the facilities afforded by each sex are variable according to the age and place in which the incarnation takes place, it remains true that each sex affords facilities for the development of experience along specific lines. The lessons that are readily learnt in male incarnations may not be easily attainable through female incarnations, and the lessons that are readily learnt in female incarnations may not be easily attainable to male incarnations. Men, as a rule, excel in the qualities of the head and will. They are capable of sound judgment and steadfast purpose. Women, as a rule, excel in the qualities of the heart. They are capable of intense love, which makes them welcome any sacrifice for the loved one. It is owing to this capacity for love that in devotional references, the name of a female has an invariable precedence, as when the bhaktis sing of Radha Krishna or Sita Rama or Sita Ram. In the qualities of the heart, women are usually superior to men. And in the qualities of the head and will, men are usually superior to women. The interesting point is that the same soul excels in the qualities of the heart or in the qualities of the head and will, according to whether it takes an incarnation in a female or a male form. The alternate development of specific spiritual qualities goes on through the alternation between the male and female forms until development is all-sided. Since male and female incarnations are equally necessary for self-knowledge, it is not right to look upon one as being more important than the other. Though there are differences between their natures, they are equally indispensable. The soul must go through male incarnations as well as female incarnations to acquire that richness of experience that is a condition of attaining the realization of the self that is beyond all forms of duality, including the duality of sex. The unity of the subject and the object of experience is unattainable as long as there is in the object any aspect or element that is not fully covered by experience. Since the soul identifies itself with the body, the psychological tendencies that harmonize with the sex of the body provide a suitable medium for expression, and the psychological tendencies characteristic of the opposite sex get suppressed into the unconscious psyche because they do not harmonize with the sex of the body, and thus find the medium of expression obstructive. When the soul takes the female body, the male tendencies are held in abeyance. The female tendencies are released for expression. In the same way, when the soul takes a male body, the female tendencies are held in abeyance, and the male tendencies are released. Sex entanglement. Identification with the body involves identification with the sex of the body, and it therefore implies a free play only for that limited part of the psyche that is in tune with the sex of the body. And since the other part of the psyche is repressed and latent in the unconscious, there arises in the consciousness a feeling of incompleteness as well as the tendency to restore completeness through attachment to persons of the opposite sex. By association with the opposite sex, the buried part of psyche, which did not go well with the body, is seeking some kind of expression through another. From this point of view, sex attraction might be said to be a result of the effort that the mind makes to unite with its own unconsciousness. Sex is a manifestation of the attempt of the conscious mind to compensate for psychic fragmentariness entailed by identification with the sex of the body. But this attempt is bound to be futile because it is not only based upon identification with the body, but accentuates it by setting into opposition the body of the opposite sex and getting entangled with it through attachment and possessiveness. When the soul endeavors to overcome sex duality through detachment towards the opposite sex, it is paving the way for understanding the experience associated with the opposite sex from within. Then a man tries to understand a woman, not through the eyes of the male, but through the imaginative reaching out towards what the woman feels herself to be in her own personal experience. In the same way, a woman tries to understand a man, not through the eyes of the female, but through the imaginative reaching out towards what a man feels himself to be in his own personal experience. So paradoxical though it may seem, the form of the opposite sex prevents the true understanding of experience associated with the opposite sex, and detachment from the form of the opposite sex facilitates the true understanding of the experience associated with the opposite sex, because it removes the barrier created by sex-obsessed imagination. If a man is transcending sex duality and trying to understand the experience associated with the opposite sex, he sometimes exhibits the psychological traits usually associated with the opposite sex. Thus, some aspirants in the male body at one phase or another actually put on the clothes of the female, talk like them, feel like them, and take on their psychic traits and habits. But this is only a passing phase. And when the inner understanding of the relevant experiences is complete, they neither experience themselves as male alone nor as female alone, but as being beyond the distinction of sex. The experiences connected with both male and female forms are accessible to the aspirant who has transcended sex distinction. He remains unaffected by the limitations of either, because through understanding, he has freed himself from the limiting obsessions characteristic of imagination.
Thanks, Ern. Elizabeth.
Okay, I'm moving.
It would take like a 15-second breather for me to catch up a little bit. Well, I did not get the title of the discourse. A little late.
We started it, Rolf. We started it in the middle of it. So, so let's continue and talk about, see if anybody remembers at the end. Okay, love?
What we're reading. Yeah. Reconciliation.
Reconciliation of conscious and unconscious mind. The completeness that the mind seeks is not attainable through attachment to other forms. It is to be sought within by recapturing the lost unity of the mind. Reconciliation of the conscious and the unconscious mind is possible not through sex attraction or other forms of possessiveness, but through non-identification with the body. Non-identification with the body removes the barrier that prevents the integration of the total experiences deposited in the psyche of the soul. To be free from attachment to the opposite sex is to be free from the domination of the sex of the body in which the soul has incarnated itself. And to be free from the domination of the sex of the body amounts to the annihilation of the major part of those sanskaras that compel the soul to identify itself with the body. The transcending of sex duality does not in itself amount to the overcoming of all duality, but it goes a long way towards facilitating the transcendence of duality in all its forms. On the other hand, the problem of sex duality is a part of the problem of duality as such, and its complete solution comes when the wider problem of all duality is solved through divine love, in which there is neither I nor you, neither man nor woman. The purpose of male and female incarnations is the same as the purpose of evolution itself. It is to enable man to arrive at his own undivided and indivisible existence. 6, the operation of karma through successive lives. In successive incarnations, there is not only a thread of continuity and identity, as manifested in the personal memory revived in advanced souls, but there is uninterrupted reign of the law of cause and effect through the persistence and operation of karma. The successive incarnations, with all their particulars, are closely and unfailingly determined by a rational law, so that it becomes possible for the individual soul to mold its future through intelligent action. The actions of past lives determine the conditions and circumstances of the present life, and the actions of the present life have their share in determining the conditions and circumstances of future lives. The successive incarnations yield their full significance only in the light of the operation of the law of karma. Persistence of karma through the mental body. Incarnations in the physical world are only apparently disconnected. Karma persists as a connecting link and determining factor through the mental body, which remains a permanent and constant factor through all the lives of the soul. The law of karma and its manner of operation cannot be fully intelligible as long as the physical body and the physical world are considered to be the only facts of existence. Karmic determination is made possible by the existence of subtle and mental bodies and worlds. The plane on which one possesses physical consciousness is the physical world. The planes on which one possesses consciousness of desires are the subtle world. And the planes on which one has mental consciousness are the mental world. The source of desire is in the mind, which is on the mental planes. Here, the seed of desire is attached to the mind. The desire exists here in an involved form, in the same way as the tree is latent in the seed. The mental body, which is the seat of the mind, is often called Karana Sharira, or the causal body, because it stores within itself the seeds or the causes of all desires. The mind retains all impressions and dispositions in a latent form. The limited I, or the ego, is composed of these sanskaras. However, the actual manifestation of sanskaras in consciousness, as expressed through different mental processes, takes place in the subtle body. The self, which is one and undifferentiated, gets apparently individualized through the limitations of the mental body, which is the seat of the ego mind. The ego mind is formed by the accumulated impressions of past experiences and actions. It is this ego mind that constitutes the kernel of the existence of the reincarnating individual. The ego mind, as a reservoir of latent impressions, is the state of the mental body. The ego mind, experiencing activated and manifested impressions, is the state of the subtle body. And the ego mind, as descended in the gross sphere for creative action, is the state of a physical incarnation. Thus, the ego mind, which is seated in the mental body, is the entity that has all of the phases of continued existence as a separate individual. The ego mind takes lower bodies according to the impressions stored in it. These impressions determine whether a person will die young or old, whether he will experience health, illness, or both, whether he will be beautiful or ugly, whether he will suffer from physical handicaps such as blindness, or will have bodily inefficiency, whether he will have a sharp or dull intellect, whether he will be pure or impure of heart, fickle or steadfast in will, and whether he will be immersed in the pursuit of material gains or seek the inner light of the spirit. The game of duality. The ego mind, in its turn, becomes modified through the deposit impressions of karma, which include not only gross, physical action, but thought and feeling. And the
And physical action.
Pardon? Excuse me, let me start the sentence over again, honey bunny.
Sure. Let me scroll back to it. There you go.
The ego mind, in its turn, becomes modified through the deposited impressions of karma, which include not only gross and physical action, but thought and feeling. and the circumstances of each incarnation get adjusted to the composition and the needs of the ego mind. Thus, if a person has developed certain special capacities or tendencies in one incarnation, he carries them on to the succeeding incarnations, and things that have been left incomplete in one incarnation get completed in the incarnations that follow. Through the persistence of impressions, the karmic links, which have been forged in one incarnation, are carried on and developed in succeeding incarnations, so that those who have been closely associated with each other through good or bad dealings have a tendency to have recurring contacts and to carry on the game of duality far enough to gather so much experience of the opposites that the soul, out of the fullness of its experience, eventually becomes ripe for dropping the ego mind and turning inwards to know itself as the eternal self. Give and take between persons forges karmic and sanskaric ties between them and creates claims and counterclaims. They have to come together to meet these claims and counterclaims. That which a person gives with a selfish motive binds him as much as what he takes with a sense of separateness. Give or take, which thus binds, need not be purely on the material plane. It may consist of the exchange of views or feelings. Karma of interference. One who pays respect to a saint on the higher planes creates a claim against him, so that if the saint is himself crossing the inner planes and treading the path, he has to tarry and give such help as will bring the devotee to that point on the path that he himself has reached. Paying respect to a saint is thus the karma of interference. Though respect as such is good to receive, in receiving it, the saint may thus have to stop on the path.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Mayhair, would you like to read, Mayhair?
Yes, thank you. I will. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud
Okay.
and clear.
Okay, thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
quick, unfailing responsiveness of soul is expressed in the law that hate begets lust, begets lust and love, begets love. This law operates not only during a single lifetime, but through several lives. A man feels impelled to hate or fear an enemy of past life, although his present life may not have provided any apparent reason for this attitude. In the same way, without any apparent reason, he is impelled to love and help a friend of past lives. The person may not be aware of the reason for his attitude, which does not mean that there is no reason for it. Many things that seem to be inexplicable become intelligible. Intelligible when they are considered in the light of the karmic links from the past lives. The law of karma. The law of karma is the law of exhibiting itself through continuous changing mutual adjustments in the individual souls that seek self-expression in a common world. It is an outcome of the responsiveness of ego minds. The rhythm on which two souls start a relationship tends to perpetuate itself unless the soul through fresh karma changes the rhythm and raises it to a higher level. As a rule, accumulated karma has a certain interior. It does not change.
That's inertia.
Inertia, okay, inertia. It does not change its momentum. Yeah, unless there is a special reason for it. Before karma is created, the individual has freedom to choose what it shall be. Then karma becomes a factor, and that cannot be ignored. It has either to be expanded through its results, counteracted by fresh karma. Pleasure of pain experienced in the life on earth, the success of failure, which attended the attainments and obstacles, which it strewed the friends and foes that make their appearance in it, are determined by the karma. For past lives, karmic determination is called fate. Fate, however, is not oppressive principle. It is man's own creation, pursuing from the past lives, shaped by past karma. It can also be modified, remolded, and even undone through karma, the present life. Could someone take from there, please?
Thanks a lot, Mayhair.
Can someone?
Yes, Rosalie Marguerite.
Thank you.
Care to read? Thanks, Mayhair.
Creative karma possible only in the physical body. If karma on earth is determined by the impressions stored in the ego mind, the impressions stored in the ego mind are, in their turn, determined by the karma in earthly life. The impressions in the ego mind and the nature of karma are interdependent. The karma on earth plays an important part in shaping and reshaping the impressions in the ego mind and giving it momentum, which decides the future destiny of the individual. It is in the arena of earthly existence that creative and effective karma can take place through the medium of the physical body. The proper understanding and use of the law of karma enables man to become master of his own destiny. Each person has become what he is through his own accumulated actions. And it is through his actions that he can mold himself according to the pattern of his heart, or finally emancipate himself from the reign of karmic determination. Unbinding karma. In a general sense, karma is of two kinds. There is the karma that binds and the karma that helps towards emancipation and self-realization. The good as well as the bad karma binds so long as it springs from the ego mind and feeds it. But karma becomes a means of emancipation when it springs from right understanding. Right understanding in this respect is best imparted by the masters, who know the soul as the self in its true nature and destiny, along with the complications created by karmic laws. The karma that comes into existence after the person has developed the sense of the distinction between good and bad. During the first 7 years of childhood, the impressions that are released for expression are very faint, accompanied by consciousness that is correspondingly less responsive to the distinctions of the world. Therefore, the actions of children under 7 do not leave strong impressions on the ego mind and do not play an important part in shaping their future. Effective karma, which molds the ego mind and its future, begins after the soul develops a sense of responsibility, which is dependent upon the sense of distinction between good and bad, which dawns after the age of 7. The law of karma is the counterpart of the law of cause and effect, which operates in the physical world. If there were no law of cause and effect in the physical world, there would be chaos. In the same way, if there were no law of karma in the world of values, there would be uncertainty in values, and people would not know whether they were to expect good or bad from their actions. In the physical world, there is the law of conservation of energy. And in the world of values, there is a law that once karma comes into existence, it persists until it bears its own fruit or is undone through counter karma. The law of karma maintains the moral order of the universe. It is through the connection between cause and effect in the world of values that the moral order of the universe is sustained. If the law of karma were to be subject to any relaxation, there would be no moral order in the universe. And without moral order, human existence would be precarious. In a universe of no moral order, human endeavor would be fraught with doubt. There cannot be any serious pursuit of values without connection between means and ends, and without the certainty that the law of karma cannot be set aside. The inflexibility of karma is a condition of significant action. Significant human action would be impossible if karma could be ignored. However rigorous the operation of karma, it does not operate in the soul as the oppressiveness of some external power, but as that which is inherent in the rationality of the scheme of life. Karmic determination is the condition of responsibility. It means that a man reaps as he sows. 7, the destiny of the reincarnating individual. The series of incarnations that the soul is impelled to take through karmic determination has a tendency to become endless. Through innumerable lives, the aspirant has come into contact. Through innumerable lives, the aspirant has come into contact with countless persons. He is entangled in a web of debts to pay and dues to recover. And according to the karmic law, he can neither avoid the debts nor the dues, since both are the outcome of desire. He keeps incarnating to pay off his debts and to recover his dues. But even when he means to clear up the account, he is often unable to do so. Debts and dues. Those other persons with whom a man has karmic links of debts or dues may not be an incarnation when he has taken a body, or he may, owing to the limitations imposed by his own capacities and circumstances, be unable to meet all the requirements of a situation. When he is trying to clear up accounts, he cannot help creating fresh claims and counterclaims, even to create new debts and dues with new persons, and to get involved with them. A man goes on adding to his debts and dues with the result that there is no getting out of his karmic entanglements.
Thanks, Rosalie Margaret. Mahu. Try unmuting.
I'm
first.
sorry,
There
yes.
you go.
Page 193. The carrying on of karma debts and dues would be endless, were there no provision for release from them through the help of the master, who can not only initiate the aspirant into the art of unbinding karma, but can directly become instrumental in freeing him from his karmic entanglements. I repeat this part again. The carrying on of karmic debts and dues would be endless were there no provision for release from them through the help of the master, who can not only initiate the aspirant into the art of unbinding karma, but can directly become instrumental in freeing him from his karmic entanglements. The master has attained unity with God, whose cosmic and universal life includes all persons, and he can, in his representative capacity, become, for the sake of the aspirant, the medium for clearing up the debts and dues he has incurred in his incarnations. Relation between master and disciple carried on through several lives. When the good karma has secured for the aspirant the benefit of the contacting a master, he should surrender himself to the master and serve him. Through surrender, the aspirant throws the burden of his karma on the master, and although service of the master he gets, and through service of the master, he gets an opportunity to get clear. The relation between master and disciple may be carried on from one life to another for several incarnations. If the master who has given instruction and help to a group of disciples takes an incarnation for his work, he usually brings them with him as his group of disciples to help them further on their path. Those who have been connected with him in past lives are drawn to him by an unconscious magnetism. There is usually a long history to the unaccountable devotion that a disciple feels for his master. The disciple is often beginning where he had left off in the last incarnation. When the disciple invites the grace of a master, it is not without reason. Sometimes the master seems to impart spiritually to a disciple without any apparent effort or sacrifice on the part of the disciple. But the right to this favor has been earned by his endeavors in past lives. The love and devotion felt for the master through past lives have formed a deep connection between him and the master, so that the awakening of a spiritual longing has its counterpart in the grace which flows from the master. It is through his own past unbinding karma that a person invites the grace of the master, just as it is through his own binding karma that he invites upon himself the pleasure and pain, as well as the good and evil of which he is the recipient. Page 194. Danger of falling back. Sooner or later, the logic of experience drives everyone to seek the highest goal and enter the path. As he advances on the path, the aspirant may develop certain capacities which enables him not only to have conscious experience of the inner, subtle, and mental worlds, but also to use the forces and powers available on the higher planes. The first two planes are dangerous, and there are many who in some life have been through them. There are many pitfalls on the path, and without the guidance of a master, the aspirant is in danger of falling back. Yoga Bahrasta. After the first few planes, the aspirant may have such setbacks that he may retrogress. Indeed, sometimes the aspirant may, through karma, invite a fall that takes him back so far that ages may pass before he can return to his first point of progress. The aspirant who has such a fall is known as a yoga bhrasta. Even the yogis are subject to the unyielding law of karma, which knows no exceptions, concessions, or preferences. Only when the aspirant has the guidance of a perfect master is his spiritual journey safe. Only when is there no possibility of a fall or retrogression. The master warns him from wrong karma in which he might otherwise get involved. The treading of the spiritual path continues for several incarnations before the aspirant attains the goal. Centuries for sacrifices, service, self-purification, suffering, and determined search are passed through for the final realization of God. God realization, which is the goal of the reincarnating individual, is never attained in a single life. It is always the culmination of continued endeavor through a succession of lives. The karma of many lives has created the bindings of the individual soul, which have to be undone by the creation of intelligent and unbinding karma, which also has to be carried on for many lives. Power in reincarnations is craving. The power that keeps the individual soul bound to the wheel of life and death is its thirst for separate existence, which is craving, connecting with the objects of the world of duality. It is for the fulfillment of cravings that the ego mind incarnates itself. When craving disappears, the impressions which create and enliven the ego mind disappear. And with the disappearance of these impressions, the ego mind itself is shed with the resolve that there is the realization of the one eternal, unchanging oversoul, or God, the only reality. God realization is the end of the incarnations of the ego mind, because it is the end of its very existence. As long as the ego mind exists, there is an irresistible urge for incarnations. When there is the cessation of the ego mind, there is the cessations of incarnation. Cessations of incarnation.
Thanks, Mahu. Rolf, are you able to read now? You got to unmute if you're talking.
Okay, I've got to get the standard view. The drama of destiny. The life of the reincarnating individual has many phases. The wheel of life makes its ceaseless rounds, lifting the individual to the heights or bringing him down. It thus contributes to the enrichment of his experience. Ideals, left unattained in one life are pursued in the next. Things left undone are finished. The edges left by incomplete endeavor are rounded off. Wrongs are set aright. The give and take between persons receives adjustment by the repayment of karmic debts and the recovery of karmic dues. In the end, out of the rightness of experience, the soul, through the dissolution of the ego mind, enters into the unity of divine life. In this divine life, there is neither the binding or giving of giving, nor the binding of taking, because the soul has completely transcended the consciousness of separateness or duality. The drama of the continued life of the individual soul has many acts. From the point of view of the worldly existence of the soul, a curtain may be said to be drawn over its life after the closing of each act. But no act yields its real significance if regarded as complete. It has to be taken in a wider context as a link between the acts that have passed and the acts that are still to come. Its meaning is in the theme of the whole drama, of which it is a part. The end of the act is not the end of the theme. The actors disappear from the stage of earth only to reappear again in new capacities and new contexts. The actors are so engrossed in their respective roles that they treat them as the be-all and end-all of existence. And for the major part of their continued life, running into innumerable incarnations, they are unconscious of the truth that the author of the drama in his imaginative production himself became all the actors and played the game of hide and seek so as to enter into full and conscious possession of his own creative infinity. The author has to play the parts of the actors to know himself in the great drama worked out through the cycles of creation.
So, good place to stop. Page 197 for next time. Thank you, everybody. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you.